Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga. Part 2, Chapter 17, The Bones Club. So, last week, Paymaster Stenstrom, following the advice given to him by his girlfriend, Lillian of Gamboa, decides to strike out to college and doing everything in a big blue way. His parents provide him with a nice apartment off of the campus at the University of Bern, which I pretty much based off of my personal alma mater, The Ohio State University. Go Buckeyes. And like Paymaster Stenstrom, that was my first foray into the real world. First time I'd been away from home. I was pretty shy, didn't have any friends. My situation was tepid at best. I didn't really know how to strike up a conversation, or I didn't know how to do shit. I was a nervous little guy. And so Stenstrom's experience being a shut-in at Belmont Manor most of his life mirrors that quite a bit. While trying to familiarize himself with the vast campus of the University of Bern, he notices that the sky becomes strange, and that has been a similar situation that's happened to him several times in the past, and conjectures that what he's seeing, now that he's trained in the sorcerous arts, is that someone opened up a doorway to the astral plane. And when that happens, things get weird. Things look weird. Things that you normally can't perceive become perceptible. The sky becomes like a nightmare of itself. And he's seen that before when he tried to run away. And then again at Rustum Labyrinth, he said everything gets all screwy. And then everything goes back to normal, meaning the doorway to the astral plane closed. And then he meets a girl who's claims that she's a freshman at the college, just like he is, and like he's doing, she's wandering around looking for the student union, asks if he'd like to join her, and he gruffly tells her no, and then she takes her leave. But then she comes back and her bearing is different, and he had turned invisible, faded into the shadows. They have a standoff, and then an odd thing happens. The sirens go off, and a tornado bursts from the heavens and starts descending, and then the girl leaves, opens again a doorway to the astral plane. This time he witnesses her do it, and she strides away. It closes, and then the tornado conveniently leaves. So tornadoes usually don't just show up on cue and then leave on cue. So something weird just happened, and we don't really know what. Moving on. This is the second chapter that deals with Stenstrom's college life, and this is pretty much it. And then that we're done with this phase. This is a longish one, so let's get to it right now. Part 2, Chapter 17, The Bones Club. And again, this, in a weird sci-fi sort of way, mirrors my own experience when I was in college. So in order to stretch out, I had to make myself available, put myself out there, join a club, which in my case was a volleyball club, because I'm actually pretty darn good at volleyball. I am. Yes, I am. I sure am. Yeah, just keep that in mind, that this, in a whacked out, fucked up scientific way, or science fiction way, mirrors my own personal experience. Anyways, let's get to it right now. Chapter 17, The Bones Club. One thing that Stenstrom could count on when he was really feeling blue was either an appearance in person or a letter from Lily. It seemed she could read his thoughts and his state of mind from far away in Gamboa, and always came to his spiritual rescue, and today was no different. Sitting merrily in his stack of daily posts was a letter in a square envelope, scented with a touch of lavender. Great lords and ladies always corresponded in handwritten letters. They were so much more personal and heartfelt than a hollow post or an Instatype. Stenstrom savored the letter for a moment before opening it. It said, "I have been thinking of you lately. I always think of you, but more so as of recently. I hear from your mother that you're all alone down there at school. She tells me you've not made any friends. When I suggested our 5-year hiatus, I never intended for you to become a hermit. I wish you take this time that we agreed upon and use it to your advantage. Live, see what's out there. And should your travels bring you into the arms of another, then that is something I shall have to accept. I wished for this time, and you are blameless in whatever comes of it. I have taken the liberty of making some inquiries for you. I certainly hope you will not be angry with me, and I hope you shall keep an open mind and do a good effort to make friends. If only for me, then please try to enjoy yourself. Thinking of you, as always, Lily." Stenstrom read the letter several times and replied. He wrote to her that he would do as she asked and not go out of his way to be a hermit. If only for her, he would try to enjoy himself and make a friend or two. What could it hurt? After lunch the next day, Stenstrom retired to the library to study for a pending exam. Characteristically, he was behind on his studies, but didn't feel overly put off. A bout of furious cramming, and he should be up to date without undue fuss. And, characteristically, he sat at the large table alone. Lily's concern for him passed through his thoughts, but he didn't have time at present to be sociable. It was second nature to avoid strangers and sit by himself. He still didn't really have a first clue how to go about making a friend. But all that had to wait because his studies were in peril. He had a selection of books piled in front of him and several hollow term cones floating about for additional research. He was so far behind. Before long, 2 people approached his stable and stood there. A smallish gentleman in a sumptuous gold and green coat and a skinny lady in a brown gown hovered over his table, staring at him. The woman, her brown hair pulled away from her face and laced into a long single braid, cooled herself with a black silk fan. She wore fingerless, lacy black gloves, and they stood there for what seemed like a long stretch of time. Eventually, Stenstrom pushed his books aside and looked up, feeling his personal space invaded in a big way. "What's this all about?" he asked. The pair took Stenstrom's question as an invitation, and they sat down, pulling their chairs out with a draggy, woody fuss that leapt across the open air of the library. The gentleman drew a small silver case from his coat pocket and opened it. Neatly housed within the case was a line of slim cigarettes, leafed in a natural brown color. The gentleman took one out, tapped it on his sleeve, and held it aloft, as if expecting Stenstrom to offer a light. "I do not have a lighter, if that's what you're hoping for," he said. The woman lifted her slender hand, and with her thumb and forefinger pinched down on the end of the cigarette. After a moment, a thin trail of smoke curled through her fingers. She slowly let go, and his cigarette was fully lit. Some sort of sorcery or hidden technology in her palm or on the pads of her fingers. Stenstrom was unimpressed. He returned to his reading. The fellow in the gold jacket took a puff and let the smoke come out of his nostrils. The delicate gray feathers of smoke rising up toward the distant ceiling, getting lost in the wood paneling. Stenstrom didn't indulge in smoking, but he found the soft, woodsy smell of the smoke pleasant enough. "I don't believe smoking's allowed in the library," Stenstrom quietly remarked, looking up from his books. The gentleman smiled slightly and continued smoking, enjoying his cigarette with deliberate slowness, one pull after the next. Finally, as his coal began to fizzle out, he spoke. "Are you Stenstrom, Lord of Belmont, South Tyrol?" he asked in a smooth tone. "I could say no," he replied, "but I'm fairly sure you already know who I am." "True enough. I am Benaster, Lord of Tartan, and this lovely lady with me is Alatrix, Lady of Zama." The woman smiled and ripped her fan. "I am of the Hoban Zamas, sir, not the wild Onaris Zamas. That is a common misconception." Apparently, she found that an important distinction to make plain right off the bat. She gestured with her fan as she spoke. "Great," Stenstrom said. "Glad to know you. Now I have a pile of studying to catch up on, so if you don't mind, could you two please push off?" Lord Benaster was unfazed. "We have an opening in an exclusive club that we belong to. You have been highly recommended, and we wish to invite you to join us this evening. I guarantee there will be rich foods, entertainments, and feats of mind and body to freeze your blood. Only the best people shall be there." "Really?" Stenstrom replied, uninterested. Lady Alatrix spoke in a greasy accent. "Are you willing to place your soul at risk? Are you willing to face the sister's wrath? If you have courage, and if you call yourself a man, meet us at this address tonight." She placed a small card onto the tabletop and slid it towards him. "Only those of good blood shall join. That shall be your first test." "Test?" Stenstrom blurted out. "As in the test I'm going to fail if you both don't clear my space." The two of them stood and walked away, the wooden floor of the library creaking underfoot as they went. Stenstrom thanked creation for their departure and continued with his reading. After a bit, his curiosity got the better of him. That damn card sitting there on the table. It might as well have been a crowd of people, a flashing light, or a blaring noise, for the card troubled his thoughts and made studying impossible. He picked the card up and had a look at it. It was blank, just an ivory white card with the faint smell of myrrh. Stenstrom was annoyed and rather unhappy about his visitors in the library. Though he sat there all afternoon, he got relatively little studying done. He returned to his apartment, tossed his things aside, and sat there. As Lily's letter had noted, he was alone and had no friends to call on. His last visitor was his sister Lyra. It was always good seeing her, and in fact the bed in the guest room where she had slept was still unmade. He felt quite lonely all of a sudden, the fine walls of the apartment closing in around him. He longed for home, for Mother, and for Lily. He got Lily's letter out and read it again. "I have taken the liberty of making some inquiries for you. I certainly hope you will not be angry with me." He wondered, were the two boors from the library, Lord Benaster and Lady Alatrix, responding to an inquiry Lily had made on his behalf? They had to have been, so in such an instance he couldn't be overly sore at them for disrupting his study session. They had, after a fashion, been invited into his presence. Maybe they were friends with Lily. Maybe they would tell her that he was a cold fish. Or maybe they were in association with the woman in gray, the astral traveler. He went through his books and picked up the scented card Lady Alatrix had given him. Again, it was nothing more than a plain white card, no embossing, hollow triggers, 4D tattoos, or stamping. He had created several simple tools capable of detecting the presence of the astral plane. The most effective was a hollow silver pyramid filled with certain salts and minerals that he had gathered. If the two of them had recently been to the astral plane, he should be able to determine that. The components within the pyramid would react and rattle about inside. He ran the smooth bottom of the pyramid over the face of the card. Nothing happened. The card had not recently been to the astral plane. Determined to be safe, he lost interest in it. He tossed it aside. He had no time for such intrigues. He put his pyramid away. He sat down. The clock near the door ticked. Through the window, he could hear traffic floating down the street. He thought about it some more. Lily had asked him to try and make friends. Lily had taken the time to reach out for him and start the process. Benaster and Alatrix, an odd sort. But still, he picked the card back up. "All right, Lily, for you, I'll give it a go," he said into the air. He looked at it, plain and white. What was he supposed to deduce from it? He considered Lord Benaster and Lady Alatrix two obviously genteel types who enjoyed a spot of mystery and gothic flaunt in their stuffy blue society circle. They had encoded this card with information of some sort, and he was supposed to be suitably mystified and would have to labor to discover its secret, matching his wits against theirs. It was a tawdry game he truly didn't feel like playing, but for Lily... He took the card into the bathroom and held it up to the bright lights, hoping something would be revealed. Nothing was. He looked at it in the mirror, and again, nothing. He held it under the faucet and ran the water over it. Nothing. He thought about Lady Alatrix's parting words. "Only those of good blood may join. That shall be your first test." Blood. Oh dear, the thought crossed his mind. He might actually have to smear blood on this card, and some cryptic lettering might react and show up. Benaster and Alatrix seemed slightly off-putting, and they appeared to have a thirst to boldly break little rules that had no punishable consequences, as with Benaster smoking in the library. Stenstrom sighed, cleaned off his shaving razor, and cut his finger. He squeezed the small cut and allowed several drops to fall on the card. Something appeared on the face of the card. He rubbed the blood around. 22 Stang at 24 bells, it read. Stenstrom stood there on the deserted street, holding the bloody card. 22 Stang, here was the place. The building was a neo-Remnaf design, being constructed of grayish sandstone in a boxy footprint, boldly windowed and framed, with a domed roof of metal and glass popping out of the center. In front of the building was a gated yard, landscaped in low hedges and beds of colorful flowers. Number 22 was placed at the wooded end of a quiet side street named Stang, just off of the main drag in downtown Bern, about 20 minutes' walk from the university. Surrounding the street on all sides were the capped domes and tall, squarish buildings of Bern, lit up in the evening air. An orderly string of quiet residences lined the street, and though there was a large bustle of activity at the mouth of the street, traffic coming and going, blinking lights from the shops, people walking, and so on, its tree-lined lengthy interior was rather sleepy. He was dressed in his best, a fine gray Tyrol coat and shirt, black knee breeches, and his beloved Tyrol boots shined to perfection. The Tyrol boots sometimes caused a stir and burn, for they at first glance looked rather like Hala rancher's boots. They had a very elongated toe area and always had a mix of leather and metal, the finest using generous amounts of silver, gold, and copper at the ankle and at the tip. They looked like boots from a suit of armor. The rustic stocks of his dual-inth pistol stuck out of his sash, and the marzible was hidden, untraceable, somewhere in the folds of his clothing. As usual, he was hatless, his wavy black Belmont hair combed and cut short. Also hidden in his coat was a special white holy stone, one that would warn him should any astral travelers become present. He grappled with his thoughts a moment and truly wished to be elsewhere. But again, Lily won out. He imagined the door to 22 Stang swinging open, and lovely Lily coming out, bounding down the steps in her festive gown and parasol to greet him. He went through the gate, climbed the marble stairs, and tried the main door. It was locked. He banged on it with his fist. After a minute or so, the door unlatched and slowly swung inward. A thin man in a servant's attire stood within. He gazed at Stenstrom impassively. "Do you have an invitation?" An invitation? Stenstrom didn't have an invitation, only this bloody card. He held it out. The servant took it and opened the door wide. "If you please," he said, motioning for Stenstrom to enter. He walked in. The interior of the building was well appointed, scented in the savory aroma of expensive foods and knee-deep in idle chatter. Fine lengths of polished granite and marble lined the floors and the walls. Rich fabrics draped the walls, and vast hangings decorated quiet sitting rooms. Young people, all dressed in their best, roamed about, holding drinks and smoking scented cigarettes. They turned and looked at Stenstrom as he passed, neither approving or disapproving of his presence. "Check your weapons, sir," the servant asked. "They shall be well cared for, and return to you as the evening concludes. It is a house rule. I shall request our attendants polish and clean them for you." Stenstrom pulled the ints out of his sash, pocketed the cinnabar strikers to prevent an accidental misfire, and handed them over. "Thank you, sir. Do you have anything else?" "No," he lied, knowing full well he had his marzible hidden in his coat. The servant placed the ints on a small table and produced a scanner. May I?" Again, it's a matter of house procedure. Stenstrom raised his arms, and the servant waved the scanner about his chest and legs. He knew the scanner could never locate the mistable marzible. The servant seemed satisfied and put the scanner away. "This way, please," he said. Stenstrom followed him through a maze of sitting rooms and luxurious halls. A steady stream of foods and drinks came and went from the kitchens as they walked deeper into the building. Stenstrom knew what this was, an exclusive club, a den of the rich. His mother and father had belonged to such clubs at various times. He remembered bits and pieces of St. Gala's Vale, a fabulous ballroom in Jakarta where his mother was an important member of the group of ladies known as the Ballwigs. Lavish and expensive, the people there like gods. It was just like this, a place to pay extravagant dues and sit with other rich people talking about nothing and feeling superior. The servant led Stenstrom away from the main area to a large oaken door carved with some sort of sunburst design. He opened it with a creak and motioned for Stenstrom to enter. At the end of a short, dark corridor was a circular room about 60 feet in circumference, domed, about 3 stories high. The curving walls were painted a lightless, sooty black and were lined all around with books and various arcane decorations. The walls were so black and lusterless that it looked like a fire had raged in the room at some point and turned all to cinders. All the sounds of people talking and moving about elsewhere in the building were hushed into dank silence. Above, Two evenly spaced wooden catwalks ringed the room, and, beyond that, the glass dome at the top admitted starlight from outside. Shadowy hints of telescopes and other astronomical equipment were placed all around the dome. He'd seen the dome from the outside. This must be the very center of the building. At floor level, axes and halberds, morning stars, and pikes of various sizes hung on the walls, giving the place a torture chamber sort of feel. There was a hint of incense floating about, and its woodsy smell quickly became unpleasant in his nostrils. The floor was a smooth green marble with a golden design hammered into the center. It was an odd design. He looked at it further as he stepped in. It was a Zaffin symbol. 4 people sat spaced along the perimeter of the wall. They sat in the shadows in large, throne-like Gothic chairs, 2 gentlemen and 2 ladies. He noticed all 4 were wearing black from tip to top, black coats, black gowns, black shirts, black shoes, and so on. One of them spoke. "Good evening, Lord Belmont. This is our sanctum sanctorum, the heart of our club. Here, your soul is at risk." "Is it?" Stenstrom replied. "As you have probably guessed, this is an exclusive club. The best of everything can be had here, should you pass muster." "Here we do things abhorrent to the sisterhood," someone else said. "Here we openly mock them and deliberately violate their tenets. We are not afraid. Here we do what we will. Here we are free." "I see. We know your mother's house of Tyrol is on the sisters' list for sorcery and other atrocities. We find favor with that. That makes you of interest to us. We would, if you pass our tests, like you to join our club. It is an exclusive offer and not presented to many." Stenstrom looked around. "No thanks. I'll have a pass." One of the women smiled, her white teeth lighting up as if backlit. "Are you afraid of the sisters? Are you afraid for your soul?" Her accent was heavy and slightly unpleasant. He thought of the sisters coming to him, their fingers digging into his flesh, and their legs around him. "I have nothing for or against the sisters," he said, "and there is nothing here that endangers my soul. This is a place of theater and dramatics and spoiled indulgence and father's wealth ill spent to entertain wayward children." The woman laughed. "Allow us to put your courage to the test." She produced a black box, which she placed on the floor. With a flick of her wrist, the box slid across the floor on its own accord and stopped a few feet in front of him. The box gave a shudder. He sensed danger and backed up a step or two. The box lid opened and spindly black legs popped out, padded and spider-like, followed by a second and then a third. Each leg was quite a bit larger than the box that had been confining it. Soon, 10 black legs waved in the air, followed by a hairy, bloated body and glittering jewel-like eyes. "Have you ever been to Onaris, Lord Stenstrom?" the woman asked, watching the creature emerge from the box. "If you have, then you might have encountered one of these before. It is a demon web, and I assure you it is quite poisonous and rather bad-tempered." Stenstrom looked at it with a bit of horror. Huge and bloated, with a leg span nearing 4 feet and a belly sack full of searing poison. "I thought you said you were from Hoban," he said to the woman, who was clearly Lady Alatrix from the library. She cocked her head and gave a slight titter. She raised her hand again, and either through TK or some arcane method or cleverly hidden technology, pushed the huge demon web toward him without touching it. It didn't like being pushed and reared up aggressively, exposing its coiled up fangs. It hissed. Stenstrom replied in kind. He waved his hands and produced 2 lime green holy stones and 2 red ones. He threw a green one at the terrifying creature and webbed it up solid, its legs flexing feebly as it tried to free itself. Stenstrom then threw a red holy stone and the webbing caught fire, flames licking up towards the distant ceiling, the room soon full of the smell of roasted demon web. The 4 people in black then clapped their approval. "Oh, well done, Lord Stenstrom, well done. We had been told that you can create holy stones in the fashion of Tyrell sorcery, and that such things are forbidden by the Sisterhood." Stenstrom headed for the door. "Yes, and with that I bid you farewell. I wish nothing to do with this club, or you lot in particular." Lady Alatrix waved her hand, and the door locked with a heavy click. "Oh, but you've only just arrived." He tried the door. It was locked tight. One of the gentlemen in black stood, wound back, and threw something which spiraled through the air. A rectangular card impacted the door frame near Stenstrom's face and stuck fast in the wood. The card was adorned with several colorful numbers and letters. "The night has only just begun, Lord Belmont. We wished you share it with us," Lady Alatrix said. After a moment, using tools unseen and speed unheard of, he had the lock picked and the heavy door swung open. He marched out. A trap door opened beneath him and he fell down a slide, plunging into pitch black, emerging in a rather shapeless cave-like room that looked like a dungeon. The irregular walls were made of boulder-like black rock mortared with ash cement. 5 archways, each barred by a stout portcullis, led off in different directions. In the center of the room was a lone figure standing in white. "Be our guest, Lord Belmont," came Lady Alatrix's accented voice from above. "However, you shan't wish to stay for long." He could hear and smell gas entering the chamber from hidden nozzles at various locations. He ran to one of the archways and looked through the portcullis. He could see a passage leading off in some twisting direction before it shortly disappeared into darkness. Stenstrom could feel a breeze passing through the bars. He rattled the portcullis. It was solid and locked to the ground. "Pick a way out. But be warned, only one way leads to a happy ending." Covering his mouth with his sleeve, he ran to the figure in white in the center of the room. It appeared to be a sister. She was in white robes, head-dressed in the usual fashion. She stood silently pointing at one of the archways. "Sister? Sister?" he said through his sleeve. She didn't respond. Upon closer inspection, she was a well-made, fully dressed, life-size dummy. The gas was quickly getting into his head. He ran to the archway the dummy was pointing at. It was an archway guarded by a solidly placed, locked portcullis. Again, a twisting passageway beyond led off into the cool darkness and disappeared. He looked around, trying to figure some way out of this. Beyond the portcullis, about 4 feet away, he noticed a panel had been cut into the stony wall. A large round button painted bright orange sat in the center of the panel. The button must open the portcullis. He reached for it, but it was well beyond his grasp. He shook his hand and produced a marzible. He lined up the shot and threw, hitting the button easily. The portcullis quickly rose up into a slot in the ceiling. Coughing, he made his way into the twisting passageway beyond. He could feel a stiff breeze pulling on him from around the bend. Stenstrom saw something carved on the floor as he took his first step. It was an IV, the ancient numerology for the number 4. He suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger. Lady Alatrix and her lot seemed to have a great apathy for the sisters, and here was a dummy of a sister pointing at an archway labeled 4. Therefore, he reasoned this door was probably not the way to get Lady Alatrix's happy ending. Something really bad must be waiting for him at the end of this passage. Holding his breath, he took a glance around. He saw, carved into the floor, beneath the other archways was I, and V. He recalled the card the gentleman had thrown into the doorframe. The card must contain a clue as to which archway he was supposed to take. He recalled seeing IV, and V, along with some other lettering. The IV had a star next to it. If he was remembering correctly, the V had a P, and the rest had M's. The gas was clogging his brain. He didn't have any time to bat this around. IV, or 4, must be the starting point of some sort, hence the star. V was also different somehow with its P's. It made sense to him to add 5 to 4, 5 plus 4, giving him 9. Obviously, there was no archway labeled 9, so he assumed the rest of the numbers with the M's might mean to subtract. 3 minus 2 minus 1 from 9 was 3. He moved to the archway labeled 3. That must be the correct way to go. But wait, didn't one of the numbers have 2 M's next to it? That might indicate that number needed to be subtracted from twice. Which one was it? It was 1 or 2. He was sure of it. It was 1. It had to be 1. Then, if his gas-clouded reasoning was correct, the archway he wanted was 2. He didn't give himself any time to mull it over. He went to the number 2 archway, produced another marzible, hit the button, and the portcullis rose up into the ceiling. He ran into the narrow, twisting corridor and went around the bend. He was instantly sucked off his feet by a powerful updraft and pulled through a dark hole in the ceiling. He seemed to be going up, up, up for a time in a twisting fashion and then started going down. He emerged through a small door and landed in a sea of pillows. He looked around. He was in a richly furnished room, lying on a vast couch. The room was lit in a pleasing yellow light, and soft music played. On the other side of the room, a great number of people stood holding drinks and smoking slim cigarettes. The 4 people in black he'd seen in the Sanctum Sanctorum stood at the front. After a moment, somebody said, "Bravo!" and everyone clapped. Stenstrom pushed the pillows aside. "What is this?" he demanded, his brain hurting a little from the gas. Lady Alatrix, her accent gone, spoke. "You pass, Lord Belmont. You pass our test, and well done. You are truly full of surprises." "You tried to murder me tonight. A demon web? A gas-filled dungeon?" "Oh, the demon web is a very convincing and expensive robot we used. We call him Arthur, and he's been killed lots of times in the past. The gas in the dungeon is a harmless sedative. It might have caused you a bit of headache later on, should you have not escaped." "And the alternative routes out of the dungeon, what of those?" Oh, one of them leads to a lesser outer sanctum room somewhere here in the building. You would have been in, but you would have been in an inferior circle. The rest head out to the alley, and one of them, the worst one, lands you in a dumpster full of food refuse, I think. Number 4, is that the one? "I believe so, yes. Should you have taken any of the alley ones, you would not have been offered a membership in our club." She smiled brightly. "You, however, picked the good door. You made it to the inner sanctum. I had a feeling you would be successful and was pulling for you. Lord Banastre stepped forward. We do enjoy a bit of theatricality from time to time. We enjoy challenging each other, but all in good fun if you've the intellect to appreciate it. We must say, we were talking before you arrived. We had no idea how you did some of the things you accomplished tonight. Most impressive. We had heard about Tyrol sorcery, of course, but to see it firsthand, to witness it in action, remarkable. People usually slay Arthur with a weapon pulled from the wall or from Vith gifts. We've seen that on occasions, but you actually appeared to conjure holy stones from thin air, and the locked door, you were supposed to fall through the trap inside the Sanctum Sanctorum, but you got through it so fast we had to use the extra one outside the door. Again, a spectacular display, sir. And the locked portcullis? How was I to open those without sorcery? Lady Alatrix sat down next to him. Her real voice was rather pleasing, and smiling, she was a beautiful young woman. Well, you could have made ample use of the mannequin of the sister in the dungeon. You could have ripped her arms or legs off and stuck them through the bars, or if you had given her a vigorous inspection, you would have found that she is held upright with a long stick, which you could have pulled out from the floor and run through the portcullis to press the button. Again, you did something we've never seen before. We call her Alice, Lord Banastre said. And I suppose to stick up the sister's butt is a metaphorical reference for your continued disdain for the sisterhood? Lady Alatrix smiled. I guess so, yes. Excellent point. So, Lord Belmont, we would like to invite you to join the Inner Sanctum of the Bones Club. It's a large club, this simply being the Burn chapter. There are chapters all over the League. Here, we gather often to delight each other, help each other out when it's needed, and on occasion to challenge one another with intrigues, but all in good fun. Helps keep the mind sharp. When you're a member of the Bones Club, you may rest assured that wherever you go, you have friends waiting for you. She looked at him hopefully. So what do you say? We'd love to have you. Stenstrom's first inclination was to walk out and leave these people behind. However, in reviewing the events of the evening, he had to admit he had had fun. These people had him completely fooled. He could picture himself bringing Lily here. Sure. Why not? And call me Belle. All my friends do. Stenstrom made great strides as the year progressed. No longer an aloof, friendless man about the school, he was now a well-liked and active member of the Bones Club. He even participated in the selection ritual, painting and dressing himself in black, and sitting in the Sanctum Sanctorum as various candidates came and went, sometimes using his Tyrol sorcery to liven things up. He was amazed how few people actually made it through the process, almost all either ending up in the alley or curling up and becoming incapacitated in the dungeon, unable to choose an exit. He had a new best friend as well, Lady Alatrix. She was like a dual person. In the Bones Club, she was rather cool and sultry, exuding confidence and wit. She asked him to show her his skills and was amazed how he could make things appear and disappear with only a shake of his hand. Even up close, watching intently, she had no idea how he did it. She wanted to know, but he was mum. Never tell. His mother's voice rang in his head. Never give up your secrets. Away from the club, however, out in the school, she was timid, shy, and uncertain. She cried out for attention and positive reinforcement, becoming almost sick with worry when she didn't get it. And they became lovers at her suggestion one evening as they gazed through the telescopes at the top of the Sanctum's dome. Just a bit of harmless fun between friends. No entanglements, No expectations, just two people enjoying each other. That's what she said. Lady Alatrix's thinly veiled insecurities came shining through as they made love. "Do you like that? Do you like that?" she often said, seeking affirmation throughout the encounter. After the first awkward session, Stenstrom was certain Lady Alatrix wouldn't want to repeat it. She seemed not to have enjoyed a moment, but she kept coming back for more, always insistent and demanding, and quickly fading to lost and fragile as the deed wore on. She liked most of all to go into the dungeon and have sex on the stony floor with the dummy Alice watching. One thing that was always a given, at least in Stenstrom's mind, was that when Lily came calling, Alatrix would have to retreat. They were, after all, just friends, and for a time, Alatrix was agreeable, disappearing without a second word whenever Lily chose to grace him with an appearance. After a year or two, Alatrix began to change her tune a little. She once suggested she be allowed to accompany him and Lily during her visits, and she'd be quiet and simply a friend hanging about, and Stenstrom agreed. However, the two ladies quickly began sniping at each other. "Is this person someone you're experimenting with, Belle?" Lily asked, rather bluntly. "What we share together is none of your business," Alatrix said. "Quite true. Nevertheless, I'd hope, Belle, you might select someone with a little more to your level." Alatrix blushed and was clearly hurt. "What do you mean?" "I mean, look at you. Rather scrawny, not overly pretty, and clearly not a great intellect or wit either. Like a little puppy dog nipping at his heels. Making love to a handsome man like Belle must be humbling for you at best." And Alatrix sat there and shivered. Stenstrom had never heard Lily speak so cruelly. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 17, The Bones Club. So that's a fun chapter. I enjoyed that a lot. And again, I based his joining the Bones Club after my own experience. But I joined a volleyball club, not a secret society where they love theater and love to pretend to go against the sisters. The building I based off of an old Mason's building that was being demolished, and I was there to take out the telephones. And in the center of the building was like an oculus, like a round room with a skylight and a dome going up out of the center of the building, and there was like symbols in the marble of the floor. At least that's how I remember it. It was like really cool. It was like walking into a pagan temple. And that's what I used to base this Sanctum Sanctorum on, and the Bones Club. I always enjoyed this part where he uses his Tyrell sorcery to get past the various challenges that they put in front of him, instead of just like pulling a weapon off the wall and hacking the robot in two, or molesting the sister's dummy in the center and grabbing the stick, or ripping off an arm or a leg and sticking it through the wall. That'd be an interesting set of images, but instead he used his stuff that he can conjure and is invited to the Bones Club, and he joins and begins to shake off his aloofness. He makes friends, he becomes a popular member of this club, and he becomes lovers with Lady Alatrix, one of many he will have coming up shortly, just a preamble. Then Lily shows up every so often, and Lily shows something of a different side of herself, a very haughty and rather jealous side, where she assumes that Alatrix is his lover and doesn't really think much of Lily, being very dismissive and so forth, and not very nice about it. But yeah, that's the Bones Club. I hope you enjoyed that. I find that a fun chapter, and that puzzle I came up with, I don't know of anyone who's ever solved it just by looking at it. I even sent it to Mr. Puzzle on YouTube. Mr. Puzzle, go check out his channel if you like watching puzzles being solved. He's very skilled, and I sent him a copy of this puzzle, and I asked him, if you want to try to solve this. He did not respond. I probably didn't send it to the right place, or maybe he just didn't see it, but he never responded. So I'd be curious if he actually was able to solve it. It seems obvious to me, but in all the test people I ran that puzzle through, they were completely baffled and clueless. So, anyways, next week, Chapter 18, the Paymaster Solutions. So we see where Stenstrom gets the idea to become a fleet paymaster, and we'll figure that out next week. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.